So I want to add a test to see what happens if there's an unexpected server error. And I could go into my server handlers here and say, okay, well, if request.get headers, I don't know, we could add some special thing to say, hey, let's do an unexpected server error. But frankly, that doesn't make any sense in here, and the indirection just doesn't buy you anything valuable. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to add a runtime server handler here, which is a server handler that we add after the server's already started. That's just specific to our single test. We're going to override the current handlers that are already in our listening server. So I'm going to add a test here for unknown server error displays the error message. This is going to need to be an async test. And we're going to do lots of the same stuff, so I'm just going to copy this and move it down here. But before we render it, we need to actually get the server ready to respond with a 500, so some unknown server error. So I'm going to call server, which is a reference to the server that I get from this setup server. We're going to say, server, I want you to use some additional handlers. And we're going to need to add another handler here, which we can grab from right here. I'm going to just copy and paste all of this right there. And instead of all of this stuff, we're going to just have a simple response where our context status is 500. And then we have JSON that says message, something is wrong. And then it looks like we need REST back. So let's come up here. We'll import REST from MSW. And then it actually doesn't matter whether we type in the username or password. We can just get rid of all of that. And instead, just click on the button directly. We'll wait for the loading to go away. And then we'll expect that alert to show up with some nice error message for us. So let's get rid of that current snapshot and let just update it for us automatically. So there we go. We have something is wrong right there. And we're off to the races. Things are going great. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is we've added a server handler for this request, effectively overriding the existing request. Now, things are working okay right here because this is the last test in our file, but if I move this up to the very top and make it the first test in our file, then sure, this test will pass just fine, but my other tests are totally going to fail. And the reason that they fail is because every time we make this post request, we're going to respond with a 500. So we need to clear this out somehow. And one way we can do that is say server reset handlers. And now my tests are passing with flying colors. But I actually think that it's better for us to put this inside of an after each. So we'll say after each one of these, we're going to clean up all of the runtime handlers, just remove them all and go back to what we had when we first set up this server. And so now I'm just going to move this back down here to the bottom. We'll get all of our tests running and all of our tests passing. Now there's one other thing that I want to make a change about here, and that is, as much as I love inline snapshots, I love variables even more. So from the reader's perspective, these two things look suspiciously alike, but there's nothing in the code to communicate that those two things actually should be the same. They're just coincidentally alike. So what I'm going to do is create a test error message right here where we'll say, oh no, something bad happened. And then we're going to use that as the message here. And then we're going to make a more explicit assertion. So instead of .text content to match snapshot, we'll actually just say, hey, expect this node to have text content test error message. So we can say, hey, these two things are intentionally going to be the same. So in review, all that we did here is we added an after each to reset all the handlers that we add after the server has started. So all the handlers that are specific and co-located to a test. And then we created this test and added a runtime handler here for overriding that login API request. And this time it's just going to give us a 500 with some test error message. And then we wait for that loading to happen after we click on the button, and we expect the alert to have that same error message that came back from this API response. And that allows us to test what happens when the server does something unexpected without adding all of those quote unquote unexpected things to our handlers here in our mock server handlers.